what's interesting about membership organizations is they're unlike other nonprofit organizations, and in the sense that typically a nonprofit organization does not deliver a direct benefit to the person who supports them. Where membership organizations, there tends to be a direct benefit that someone receives, even though they're supporting also a nonprofit organization, as Andrew is saying too. They got to believe in that mission. And once they believe in that mission and that purpose, membership versus a gym or something like that, that's not a nonprofit. There's
except the YMCA.
Yeah, it's a both and, right? And so what's interesting is that as a result, so you have to market mission and purpose like a nonprofit organization does, but you also have to market value and what are people receiving directly as a benefit. So it's a more difficult proposition than either a product or service or a straight nonprofit organization. It's actually the combination of both. And so you're actually in competition with all people's discretionary time and money. And I think you have to say to yourself, I not only have to compete on purpose and mission with the nonprofit world, but I also have to be just as smart as the for-profit world and understand that I'm competing on a value proposition as well. So it's value and values.
Chris, do you agree?
Yes. In fact, I'll take it so far as to say selling memberships, I don't believe in selling. You can't sell some things. What you want to do is help people join. So they have to be somewhat interested, to Bill's point, to even care. And then at that point now, rather than thinking of the traditional sales funnel, I think of an interest funnel, an engagement funnel that is authentic. And that's where that old marketing comes in, so that you say the right things at the right time that are genuinely directed to that person. Because if I feel like you're just sending me a mass answer, dear blank, you're not authentic. And then because you're a membership, what you say you have to do, because if there's incongruity there, then, liar, liar, pants on fire, I believe is the term for it. And the other one that I'll mention, and I hope we talk about this some more, is brand evangelists. These are people who believe in your organization enough to tell others. Now, that's not a new idea. It's kind of like how the world has always run. But now with technology, social media, and all that, you want them saying things about you that you can't say yourself. So the example I use when I'm teaching is, if you say you're cool, you're not. But if 5,000 people say you're cool, chances are you are. So it's just a matter of making the whole thing work. So I'll stop now.
No, that's very good. And everything you just said, more relevant today than ever, because we're all stuck inside, and social media is the way we evangelize now. So incredibly relevant. Greg, I keep saying this, but your feet are on the ground. You run a membership organization, and actually I'm going to qualify it. You're running a membership organization that is shut down right now due to COVID. How does all of this play into that? Is what Bill and Andrew and Chris, what they shared, is that the truth?
Yeah, I would agree with everything that's been said. I'd maybe kind of highlight or echo a couple of thoughts too. And you're right, Katie, we are, I would say we're partially closed. We're allowed to do a few things that in the state of Michigan are allowed, like licensed childcare. And we just wrapped up day camp last week. But I would agree with Bill, the value proposition, in addition to Andrew's mission focus, is critical. Especially if people in Y world are paying typically on a monthly basis for their membership and access. there's got to be great value there. So I agree with that. And I would just say our experience in membership, which has been closed since March 16th, really has relied almost exclusively on our members who became sustaining members early on. And I would say that loyalty has largely been reflected in how people saw that we showed up in the community, what we were doing to help kind of serve in food delivery and distribution, for example. We're hosting right now, I think it's our 5th or 6th blood drive in the community, because we were one of the few spaces who were willing to let people come in for a blood drive. We've also had virtual programming through the roof, something new that we had to expand and kind of get our feet on the ground quickly. But our messaging, to Chris's point, has been all about what we're doing and why you'd want to continue to support that. And we have seen, I mean, it's, you know, we didn't expect to be closed this long, but we have seen on average, you know, 60% of our membership base stay with us as sustaining members. And that's been a phenomenal level of support.
Okay.
I think we've talked a lot about, you know, how the value of membership might have been when
What's that?
But now
No,
people are feeling.
No, it's north of Muskegon. It's supposed to rain all day.
Sorry about that, Greg. Just a
That's
reminder to attendees, please go ahead and mute while the panelists are talking. We'll open up for questions pretty soon.
But I would just add that Chris just, you know, mentioned something that reminded me about the net promoter, which is the evangelist kind of thinking too. And I'm sure Chris is familiar with the net promoter score, which in my old Y in New York City, we used a lot. And that's the same principle around having people, you know, choose to recommend you to a friend. It's a score, it's a value-based score. It's got an equation attached to it. And it's asking the critical question, would you recommend us? And for people who take that step of recommending, that's a real tie to sustaining membership in general. And that's what you're working towards constantly.
Okay, so we've had a question come in that kind of ties into this whole evangelism piece, and it's from Tim Newbert. He's asking, his organization relies on institutional membership, so not Katie Apple becoming a member of the YMCA, but, you know, say the YMCA becoming a member of Do More Good. We're flipping it to the institutional model. What changes? What changes in how you message and communicate for that? Andrew,
Yeah.
do you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. Just thinking through the question. It's a really good one. And I would say that a big part of it is figuring out, just like you would any person, what matters to those organizations. You know, generally organizations themselves have scale. You know, you're not usually an organization of one. So if you are forming a partnership with another organization, you know, what does your organization and its members do to help that organization and their members? With something as large as 2 organizations, there's just a lot more opportunity to value swap. And so that was what I would be focusing on first and foremost. What is it that you can provide to them that they currently don't have, and vice versa? And then, you know, maybe exploring that on a small scale first. You don't have to have a huge formal partnership. You can scale that up. Start with something small, something like a single co-branded event, you know, an email, newsletter swap, things of that nature. See if you can prove out that value early for your organization and their organization. And then if it's working, just start scaling it up.
Nice. Any other thoughts from any of our panelists, any members out there or attendees that are leading membership organizations? Feel free to chime in.
I'd like to add just a perspective if I could.
Sure.
We've been watching, we do a lot of database work, and even the strongest member groups lose about 10 to 12% of people who've been with them 4+ years. What happens is that there are signposts along the way that they're becoming less involved. And so for some people, it might be instead of giving 12, an annual gift, or, once a month, they opt out and start doing on occasion. But having a clarity about how to monitor your members with other data that you have, I think is key. And second, we have seen huge differences by age in terms of the message that people want. The card-carrying ACLU is a thing of the past. They really want to identify with the organization, and the kind of offers that you make really can be very age-specific if you're carefully monitoring your members, because every organization is going to be unique, but what those under 35 are going to want is something quite different from membership than those 35 plus.
Thanks. And folks, that was Josh McQueen. Josh leads McQueen Mackin and Associates. He was one of our speakers at last year's Do More Good conference. He is a data and research wizard. So glad to have you here, Josh. I think we're going to jump on to the next question, but I'm going to combine it with one that came through in the chat as well. So Caitlin asked about how a small organization can scale up to compete with the larger organizations. And then we also had a question come in ahead of time about how you get started from ground zero. No one knows your organization. What are the first steps to grow your membership? Andrew?
Yeah, happy to jump in. So while it's true from the moment you conceive of an organization, a membership organization, no one knows about you, but that changes hopefully within an hour, if not 24 hours. You have close friends, you have family, you have neighbors, people who may share interests. If it's a organization with an interest that is not widely shared, but something that other people who already have interest in this but are not part of a formal organization, you have those people as well. So I would start with that group. So close friends, families, neighbors, people who are already interested, who may not be part of an organization. From there, you can expand onto your own social media channels. So your personal Facebook, your personal Twitter, and say that, hey, I'm starting an organization, and just send me a private message. We can talk about it. Grassroots, just getting started. And anyone who starts from the beginning and shows interest, make sure you're empowering those people, giving them tools. Even things as simple as, this is how to describe what our organization is about. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is how you can help. Answer those questions for them so that when people ask them, they can share that with them. I'm going to assume once you've done that, you've got a small group of dedicated fans. And then the second step is to really make yourself discoverable or easy to find. So you could do that digitally. Having a website is a great place to start. If you can't get yourself onto a website, even your own Facebook page for your organization. So not just you personally, but your organization, you can start there. And then, you can, depending on what kind of organization you are, there are things like door-to-door flyers, which I can actually attest do a lot of work. I run a local association for my neighbors, the South Eatonville Residents Association. And we were able to go north of 150 members just doing door-to-door and word of mouth. So those are powerful tactics to get started, and where I would start. In fact, it's where I did start.
That's great. Bill, I want to hear your perspective from all your years. I know you've helped quite a few startups before. What do you think?
Yeah, at the beginning, it's just really awareness building, and you got to figure out how to generate awareness. And there's two things that we know work when it comes to building any kind of brand and any kind of following, whether that's a consumer following or what, and that is awareness and frequency. And so, the larger you can make your awareness, that's your reach. And the more times that you can get in front of people, you're going to be remembered. And so, between those two levers, I mean, you always have to find a balance between those two levers of reach and frequency, you know, and in this COVID world, you know, it's a little more difficult because, I mean, a lot of that stuff, you know, you used to be able to just go to a network event and meet a bunch of people, right? Well, now you have to figure out how to get in front of people in a more digital world, in a more virtual world. Even things like, you know, attending like these kinds of events and letting people know that you're out there, especially being smart about, you know, the types of virtual events even that you attend, and get your name out there. Make sure that you're prepared to ask a good question so you get some monitor time, right? And so, you know, yeah, you know, outside of that, there's always, you know, ads and direct mail and, you know, social media and, you know, and then managing your content and trying to get in front of more and more people all the time. But it really comes down to, how am I going to grow my awareness, and how can I manage my frequency and get in front of those people that are important to me as often as possible? That combination is the magic combination of how you grow anything.
Nice. Frequency and messaging, which one wins, Bill?
Frequency always wins.
Frequency always wins. Chris, anything?
Even bad messaging can work frequently. You know, we see it in politics all the time.
The work that we've done in working with nonprofits builds on what Bill just said, because ultimately it's trust. And if you just try to build your organization by making your name seen everywhere, then even frequency can't save you, because, you know, people who are not at all interested in your category become aware of you. But when you combine the right kind of message with the right kind of frequency, you get depth of familiarity. And a lot of nonprofits make the mistake of saying, I do 6 things. I got to tell people I do 6 things. And then you don't get frequency. All you get is an array of messages. So clearly understanding exactly what you want to say, and then building frequency for that builds trust, and trust builds long-term commitment.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any thoughts on that? Getting started, new membership organizations.
I'll come at it from the digital space first. One of the things that I absolutely believe in is like-mindedness. So it's what's going to attract people initially is, oh, that's interesting. And you have to be able to do that in 6 seconds. Most organizations take 3 to 5 minutes. You don't have 3 to 5 minutes. So if you remember when you meet someone at a networking event, when they're talking and you're not listening, and we've all done it, thank you for smiling. What that's telling you is they're not interested. You're not interested. So what is the 6-second message? It's got to boil down to that. And then you got to get, what I want you to do is think backwards to, if you want people to find you, because remember, the internet is based on me out there looking, and then keeping very good research on what terms are coming in. Because it will be different for different kinds of people, and even things like long tail to short tail searches change. They tend to be longer initially, and they'll shorten up as you get closer to, you know, the engagement part.
So Chris, we had a good question come in related to the 6 seconds, because I hear that too, and I'm like, oh my goodness, 6 seconds? How many words is that? How many words should we try to use to convey our message?
Let's see, I'm trying to think of it. It's typically, what is it, about 100 words, 120 words in 30 seconds, Bill?
Yep, 100. Well, that's the old model, you know.
Yeah, but I'm thinking so 25 words. I would say less. Here's what I think of. Who here remembers outdoor boards? How much time do you have on that? 6 seconds or less. If you think outdoor online, you're gonna be at least, because all you want to do initially is get somebody to go click. So you got to find the message that boils down to 6 seconds that says the thing that is most important to get people to go, oh, I'd like to learn more, click, and then allow them to discover you. Don't sell them.
The rules on outdoor, I think that's excellent. The rules on outdoor are 7 words and 1 visual.
They're gone.
So outdoor is really a good framework to think about when crafting any sort of message.
I also believe that that's how homepage should be. Because your only job on a homepage is to say, hi, would you like to come in? Not pretend it's a magazine ad. And your bounce rates will show you that truth.
Wonderful. So kind of building off of that, I'm going to go to the next question, but it ties in. We have a lot of stratification in our audience with membership organizations, at least often, not with every case. How do you deal with it when you're trying to appeal to Gen X, but you also have millennials and boomers? How do you convey your message in these brief times, these impactful short messages, when you have so many audiences?
Yeah, so to that, I think there's 2 kind of things at play. You do want to tailor your message to the audience you're speaking to, but there's going to be common ground where all those groups converge, like your website. I can't make my website different for someone who's 22 than from someone who's 45. So you need to kind of find in those 6 seconds or 7 words something that will pique the interest of all those groups. However, once you decide that I want to build a greater audience with people who are early Gen X or late Gen X, then you can get really targeted in the campaigns you run, right? Your homepage is for everyone, but I can, within less than an hour, spin up a page that essentially is a modified version of my homepage that speaks directly to something about an older Gen X that would resonate with them, right? Then I can target my messaging on social media using things like lookalike audiences to make sure that that's only being shown to people who are, in that age bracket, in the geographic regions I'm interested in. And, when you are running campaigns like this, you get feedback in the form of data. So step 1 is to spin it up and target very specifically those groups you want, but then to analyze it afterwards. Is it resonating? Am I getting a high bounce rate, a low bounce rate? Am I getting ultimately membership signups from a campaign like that? And you can, I would say, you can't do it all, but figure out where exactly you want to play, where you want to grow, and focus there first. And then maybe move on to a second one. And the learnings from the first are going to inform the second. So that would be my answer to that question.
Nice.
One interesting stat that came out recently was about Facebook usage and social media usage, right? And the number is before COVID, 71% of all Americans, regardless of age, were using Facebook and Instagram 2.5 hours a day. That's all Americans, regardless of age group, right? Listen to that, 71%, 2.5 hours a day on average. Since COVID, that number has moved to 72% of all Americans are on social media 3.5 hours a day on average. So while I understand there may be messaging nuances between audiences, the reality is social media is our new mass media. It's our, for the people who used to be around when we only had 3 TV channels and 1 newspaper, Facebook and Instagram, and you probably maybe throw in YouTube to that, is the new CBS, NBC, and ABC. And they are mass audiences now. Now, what's nice about them is the beauty of digital media is you can slice up your groups. You can target specific groups and ages and with different messages. But that is the medium really to reach everybody today.
Greg, go ahead and share your perspective. Because you serve a huge spectrum of age groups with really robust programming for each one too.
Yeah, I think for us, Katie, and I'm certainly not our our social media expert. But I have learned just out of my own, 30-year career that to be able to communicate with all those audiences, requires the frequency that we talked about earlier, and making sure that you're doing, everything that might hit. We have a membership base that's largely skewed, towards the elderly side of the equation. We've realized that even if we change things like our hours of operation for a given weekend, if we're not communicating multiple times with that same audience in some of the old-fashioned ways, we're gonna upset the apple cart in a few spots. So we've learned that frequency and being able to use both social media and some traditional methods, including in the pandemic, believe it or not, we've had a senior outreach that's all focused on the phone. Because how many are not in that age group in a social media, position? They're not on Facebook, or they're not checking it often, but they really appreciated a phone call. And so they were inspired by that. In fact, you may know, Katie, we had several board members who were volunteering to do some of our senior outreach phone calls, and they would stay on the phone for, like 45 minutes a call with an individual. And it just showed that was the touch that was needed with that age group. On the startup question, I just would add this too, and we're kind of blessed in the Grand Haven community to have a local newspaper. And I would just say that sometimes I've had an old board member, I'm sure Bill would agree with this too, who often said when we were thinking about, this was more in the New York market, should we ever buy time, buy space in an old newspaper? And he said, listen, this was the editor. I shouldn't be telling you this, Greg, but an article will do a lot more than any ad would ever do. And I think the reality is that, local media, when you're a startup, if you can think of a great story to pitch to local media, we've seen some improvement in just website usage by starting a blog post, for example. Content that can help drive people to your mission and your message and get people interested is also a great way to get out there.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to jump on to the next question here, because this is my favorite question that came in, and I want to hear the answer to it. What's more important, especially, I want you guys to think about this and respond in terms of today's world, so pandemic world that we're in. What's more important, content or community? And how do you foster community when most of us are required to be socially distanced?
Wow, that is the question, isn't it, right now, Katie? To me, it's like asking, if you're a plant, what do you need? Do you need water or sunshine? I think ultimately as an organization, you're not going to go very far if you don't have both. As for in a world of COVID, what is more important, content or community? You know what? I think given that we're all social distancing, we're probably a little bit starved for community right now, more than we're starved for content. In fact, I think we can get content pretty easily. We're probably content overloaded in many ways. So I would say for an organization, you really have to start thinking about, how do you feel like a community as an organization when you can't get together and do things like your gala, like your, get together and have like a card night at whatever meetup place that your organization normally had. It's challenging and it's difficult. I've seen some pretty creative things like walking meetings. Like normally you'd see organizations maybe throw together like a Friday morning walking group. Well, now you can do it digitally. You have Zoom out on your phone and you're kind of walking and talking, and every now and again you pop your face up. I would not do that when you're crossing the street, but otherwise, it has some legs. So that's what I would do. I'd say you have to start thinking about how to build community when we're all wishing we had more of it right now.
I'm going to open this up. Anybody who'd like to respond, how do you do that? How do you build community when you can't connect in person?
The outdoor poster that you talked about, we did some work for Salvation Army in 3 different cities, and they had a really powerful tagline, I thought. But when we A/B tested showing San Diego a scene that was definitely San Diego versus Dallas, huge difference. And that people, that community connection of people in the local community wanting to give Salvation Army that was in their community was huge. So I think you can think about the homepage as a striking visual that talks about community. If you're serving poor kids, to have them in mask surrounding you as you tell what you do for those kids. I think visually, because I think the community is really an emotional story right now, and visuals usually have more power than classic word content in delivering that emotion.
Absolutely.
I'll go back to my thing about, I'm not so much a fan anymore of where I grew up about demographics and all these things that are true about these groups. I think you let people find each other. That part of building community is by letting birds of a feather flock together. So your organization is made up of smaller groups. The more you can foster those folks to stay in connection with each other, the healthier everything will be. Because as Bill mentioned earlier, your brand has to represent one single truth that can be communicated in 6 seconds. But the way I talk about it is within different groups is think of accents. Here in Detroit, we call it pop. Other places call it soda. You with me? It's still the same stuff, but think that way and allow people, and you will also get by creating these smaller groups, when you let them, if you will, self-lead, but you're monitoring from, close enough so they don't get crazy or anything. Now you've got your basis for evangelism. Because the leaders will naturally come up and the thing will grow. And as long as you keep putting out, I always go back where your A/B testing begins now, are in search terms. See what's pulling, see who it's pulling, and then think that through how you've done your segmentation scheme.
Nice. Who else?
Yeah, I would look at, so the natural order of things, interestingly enough, has always been, you have to build great content in order to attract community. And then that will then attract support. So, chicken or egg, question, is it, water or sunshine? I mean, just the natural order of things is you create content, right? And then that creates community. But it's also how you approach creating that content, right? If you don't approach creating that content saying we're going to create some content that's about community, and starts creating, sometimes the best content you can put out is a question or a survey that then creates a discussion, and that starts to create a community. We've had blog posts through Do More Good, and it talks about, the 6 P's of marketing. Marketing's always had the 4 P's, but the 2 P's that we've added are purpose, right? And so that would be your content, what purpose is your content surrounded around? But then the 6th P is actually participation, realizing today people want to be engaged, that they want a 2-way conversation with the organizations that they're involved with. And they want some dialogue and some back and forth. So, if I were pressed, I would say you have to focus on your content strategy first, and your content strategy has to include elements that allow you to be a community and build community. It isn't a one-way conversation of you just blaring information out to the marketplace. It's about a give and take conversation where people are involved in helping you grow your brand and grow your reach and be better, and they feel like they're contributing to something. They aren't just being bought or sold.
Bill, I want to interject real quick because you keep referring to this blog about the 6 P's.
Yeah.
In your head, you haven't written it yet.
I haven't.
More good audience is waiting for that blog. So next week.
I actually have written it. We just haven't released it yet.
Okay. So coming soon, folks.
Coming soon.
So
Kate,
oh, go ahead.
Weigh in quickly here. I think, you know, I agree with everything that's been said, but if I had to be forced to make a decision in COVID, I agree kind of with Andrew that community really has, you know, overtaken the lead right now and can maybe be the backdoor into content. I mean, one of the things that we did that was surprisingly well received, and we were literally surprised by it, is using virtual platforms to kind of keep our community connected. And I tell you, in our preschool, we had over 70 people following a virtual Easter egg hunt on Easter weekend. And it was great because Meredith Long, who's our senior program director over early childhood, was seeing who was streaming in while it was happening in real time, calling out kids' names while it was happening. And I think we heard back from families after that was a real great way for us to stay connected at a time when we had no real way to do that. And so I just think that creativity of keeping our communities well connected, even on virtual platforms or outdoor parks. I saw somebody in the chat say, talking about, you know, getting together in an outdoor space and being distant. We've had a group here at the Y, Body Basics, that has met early mornings. Well, through the whole pandemic, even without our being open, they were meeting here all throughout the end of the winter into the spring, early morning, just socially distant, keeping together a walking club. So there are ways to be able to do that, but I'm really feeling, you know, as a membership organization, community is such a powerful component right now. It's combating mental health isolation, all kinds of things that I think are, you know, 6 months into this thing really weighing on people. So community is a big push, and it's the heart and soul of a good why.
I think it's the most requested thing that we're getting through Do More Good right now is more networking opportunities. Just a quick plug, we're working on it. We have a platform coming in conjunction with our conference, so stay tuned. More ways to connect with each other are coming. So we have less than 10 minutes left, and I'd like to take a question from the audience, from the attendees. So if you have something, throw it in the chat, or feel free to turn your mute off and share with us. Trying to flip through who's turning their mute off. Nobody? Last chance.
I just want to say real quickly that, so our organization, we're the American Association for Employment Education. Our members are institutions, but we, you know, got individual representatives, right? And we tend to be, I mean, we're national. We tend to do a lot of our things virtually. But one thing that I'm thinking a lot about is because of COVID, we've actually got, you know, a lot of people, as you're all talking about your local organizations continuing those connections virtually and amongst your members. I'm thinking now this is an opportunity that I think historically our members may not have really been open to, but now everybody's got so much experience with Zoom and these other platforms that I think going forward, we as a national organization could have walking groups and gathering groups virtual, because now there's so many people that have experienced that in other parts of their lives. So I'm kind of excited about, you know, that to me is one of the silver linings of this pandemic, is that people have discovered that there is some, I mean, there's certainly Zoom fatigue, but I think there's certainly an opportunity post-pandemic for having virtual get-togethers, and that wouldn't really have been strongly considered in the past.
Absolutely.
I would agree with that and say that there has been, I've actually seen some enormous creativity in virtual events. We've covered this in some other stuff that we've done, but I'll just remind people, or if somebody hasn't heard it before, 2 events in particular that somebody did a kind of a premiere video on their organization that normally they would have shown during a banquet or something like that. But they treated it like movie night, and they said it's going to be at 7 o'clock on this channel on YouTube. and they sent all their supporters like popcorn and candy and treated it like a red carpet event in their own home, right? And so, and then another organization actually had a black tie dinner, virtual black tie dinner, and they had their donors, you know, obviously a select number of donors, but they had their donors all connected virtually, you know, where they could see each other's tables and stuff like that. But they delivered the food with black tie delivery people, right? And they actually had black masks, right? And so, and when I look at those two events, if people were not forced to be innovative because of COVID, right? They would have never done those things, right? But they were forced to be innovative, and they did two things that I go, I'm not sure a banquet or a networking event would be more memorable than getting food delivered by black tie delivery people, right? I mean, how awesome is that, right? So I agree. I think this has, if you allow it to not be, you know, something that weighs you down versus saying it's an opportunity to do something really unique. I think there's still some ideas out there that people haven't come up with that could be really, really impactful.
That's awesome. And anyone else, any cool things you've seen, any cool ideas you've tried?
I have a question. This is Jenny Griffin. I'm with WMCAT, the West Michigan Center for Arts and Technology. And being in the nonprofit world, we hear a lot about how everyone's going to virtual events, and we've been getting the vibe that there's just a burnout from it. And so I've been curious to see if anybody has been trying to do more of this like grassroots community building, like one-on-one, or somebody mentioned the morning walk, so that maybe when things come back online again, maybe the opposite, when we can actually physically get together, not just back online, that people have felt and built that community during this time, that maybe now they're ready to give or become a member or attend an event. But we've just had lots of discussions about burnout with virtual events.
Andrew, what are you seeing from the Wild Apricot membership? Is it, I mean, we know there's mass burnout, but any silver lining to that?
Yeah, I mean, burnout with Zoom is absolutely a real thing. Everyone knows it. Everyone feels it. I'm sure everyone who's even on this call feels a little burnt out. But thanks for sticking with us. I would say, if you want to, I think the heart of the question here is, how do you still connect and overcome the burnout that occurs, so that those connections still thrive? And kind of jumping off what Bill said earlier, is you really do have to just try and find something creative. So one thing that I, just listening to the question, thought about was, okay, if not everyone wants to get on to a virtual event, a discussion, a webinar thing, expert speaker, what about just finding pen pals, but do it maybe with a phone call? I don't know how many people are in your organization, but 100, 200, 500 people, even 5,000, just you could send out an email saying, hey, we have this cool idea how to connect our membership, keep everyone engaged. Do you want to just jump on a call and have a conversation with someone who may have never had a conversation with before, or ideally would have been able to talk to at something like a black tie event? That's one way. You just have to kind of think outside the box for a little bit, and eventually this will all go away, and we'll probably kind of think back on Zoom meetings for a little bit and say, well, thank goodness we don't have to do any more of those. But then I think eventually people are kind of, to Tim's point, going to be like, that actually was pretty good for a lot of things, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Maybe just not one every day.
Eventually, we'll have to change out of our pajamas every day, and it will be annoying. We'll miss Zoom at some point. So, are there any other questions? We have about 2 minutes left.
I do. When you're talking about being discoverable and awareness and frequency, I've been trying to do more social media. But if I'm looking at 7 words and a visual, I'm not great at 7 words, but does a topic have to be consistent that people are seeing? Or, for example, I one day might be writing on fear and another day on anxiety, and using different images. I mean, should I be sticking to one topic for a quarter, or can I continue to just, I thought it would give people an idea of the broad areas that we can help with.
Yeah, so great question, Deb. I don't know off the top of my hand the stats for every social channel. I know they're relatively the same. The half-life of a tweet is about 7 minutes. So if you're writing about 10, 15 different things, different people are going to see that at different times. So you don't have to be incredibly consistent all the time on your topic. I think you can kind of give them the option. The other thing about social media is it's kind of like a buffet, right? You're there, and if you don't want to see it, you just scroll away. Thinking, 30 years ago, okay, there was a commercial on a show you're watching, you're not really interested. Okay, maybe you walk out and go get your drink, but for the most part, you're kind of a captive audience. With social media, you're not so captive. It is within 0.5 seconds able to get away from something you're not interested in. So it's kind of like fishing with a big net. You put out the content that you think is reflective of your organization, and over time, people are going to find the ones that fit for them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I would add to that a couple of years ago, there was actually an article from Forbes magazine when magazines were dying, right? And everybody was like worried that magazines were going to go away. And Forbes magazine saw an opportunity for them, and they shifted and saw themselves as content creators, right? And they actually, now Forbes magazine reaches far more people and has a much larger digital subscription base than they ever had in terms of an actual physical copy subscription base. And they become wildly successful. And they said that there were 3 things that they learned about content, and that was variety, quantity, and quality. And so they said, make sure that you have a lot of variety. And that scrolling thing, when you think about your own scrolling, how deep do you really go when you scroll, right? On Facebook, you go like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 deep, and then you might go over to Twitter, or you might go over to Instagram, right? You're not really scrolling. And so make sure that you have that quantity so that you're always putting stuff out there. But also, I think variety is important too, that people don't get bored of hearing the same thing over and over again from you. But then it does come down to quality as well. It's like really put out, that's your brand that you're putting out there. And what do you want? Do you want your brand to be smart? Do you want your brand to, look smart and be good and look like it's intentional and really, and so it's really important they do focus on quality as well.
Thank you. So branding is more than the logo, more than the design. It's the message and the quality as well.
Branding is the promises you make. Branding is the promises you make and the promises you keep, right? That's your brand. People are saying, okay, you're making this promise to the marketplace, and this is, and then you have to give me some proof points that you actually keep that, right? And so in your content, make sure that you're balancing that, saying, these are the things that we do, and these are the things that we provide, but you also have to balance it with a community that supports that, and some testimonials, and some proof points that you're actually really delivering on what you say that you deliver on.
Thank you.
I would also add to, as the brand police kind of guy, don't write about things just because you think they're fun. Write about things that are consistent with the brand. So our friend Mel sent out a note, and I totally agree with it. Other part of branding is consistency. Doesn't have to be the same topic, but I have to know, and again, the 6-second rule, who's sending it? Because if I say orange to you, what retailer am I talking about? Like that. I hope you answered Home Depot.
That's a good example. Okay, we are just about out of time. I wanted to remind everyone that this is a monthly activity. We have ideation sessions every month, usually the last Friday of the month. Next month, we have Holly Johnson. Holly is the president of the Fry Foundation and the former president of a community foundation, actually the most successful community foundation in Michigan. So she brings a great perspective on how nonprofits should be talking to foundations, especially during this time when requests are through the roof. So if you are a grant writing organization or you want to get started in grant writing, join us next month. domoregood.org/ideation. Also, don't forget the Do More Good Nonprofit Conference is coming up on October 1st. We are running a special. When you become a member, you actually get access for free. So it's incredible. Bill, do you want to say a couple things about the speakers we have coming?
I'm just telling you that, you know, we keep talking to the speakers that are going to speak, and because they're relying on us to give them feedback on their content, and we've got just some really fantastic speakers coming up. You know, we got somebody, a major player at Facebook and social media for nonprofit organizations at the national level. She's in New York City. She's a top level executive over there. We've got somebody from the White House coming. We have the head of Compassion International, Ken Caldwell, you know, who you're seeing in this. What's interesting about Ken Caldwell is he used to be the chief marketing officer for Wendy's, Pizza Hut, Domino's, and then he was also the CEO of Papa Murphy's Pizza. And he was known as one of the best chief marketing officers in the country on the business side. And now he's the head of marketing for Compassion International, and he's brought a culture of innovation into Compassion, which I would say, you know, number one, it's cool that he's bringing the idea of innovation into the nonprofit world, but especially an organization like Compassion, which I would say is one of the least innovative nonprofits out there. They've relied on child sponsorship forever. And so you're going to hear his story about how he's really created a culture of innovation in one of the least innovative nonprofits that are out there. And he just told us a story the other day of how that innovation has really paid off, where they went into the COVID epidemic expecting to have to rely on their reserves, of that, you know, that funding was going to go just like almost virtually disappear. And they were very concerned about what was going to happen. And the reality is, in their innovative thinking, they went to market with a different approach. And I'll let him tell it when he's there. Not only did fundraising keep pace with what they had prior to COVID, it's actually increased, and they haven't even touched their reserves at all. So we're offering this great deal of $99 for a membership and then free attendance at this conference. It's just a fantastic deal. I would encourage you to take advantage of it, because we got a great lineup.
Absolutely. Andrew, thank you so much. Everyone, I would encourage you to check out Wild Apricot. Not only do they have great content, they're an amazing platform to be a part of. Chris Grintham, thank you so much. Check out the Utmost Group. Chris runs an agency in Detroit that specializes in working with nonprofits. Greg Coyle, Tri-Cities YMCA, thank you so much. And Bill McHenry, you can check out Bill at the Do More Good website, but also he runs an agency that specializes with nonprofits called Haven. So thank you all so much for being a part of this. I hope to see you next month.